You know what makes a story truly frightening and captivating? It's not because it's elaborately staged or deliberately crafted to be horrifying, but because it comes from real experiences happening to ordinary people just like us. Moments that strike without warning in familiar places we believe are safe, making us realize that if it happened to them, it could just as easily happen to you. Before we begin, I have a question for you. What's the one winter moment in your life that still gives you chills? Comment it below. I read every single one, and your story might even inspire a future episode. What you're about to hear tonight are all true stories sent in by the people who experienced them. And if you've ever gone through anything strange, unusual, or haunting, send your story to the email in the description. You never know. It might appear in the next video. If you're ready, turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss the next set of true encounters. Now, let's get started. The fear from that night has never really left me because it was one of those moments when the world you think you know flips into something colder and sharper without any warning at all. I grew up in a little village about half an hour from the nearest city, the kind of quiet place where everyone knows who lives behind every door and strangers stand out instantly. It's surrounded by fields, muddy footpaths, and patches of woods that look harmless in daylight but take on a different personality after dark. Because the last bus home left the city at 9, I was constantly gambling with time whenever I stayed out late, and on that particular December night, the Christmas lights in the city made everything feel too alive for me to head home early. I ended up at a casino to kill a few hours, lost more money than I should have, and boarded the last bus with nothing but regret and freezing shoes. I was so lost in my thoughts replaying a bad blackjack hand that I hit the stop button too late and stepped off one shelter farther than usual. The air was wet and cold enough to sting, the kind that makes the leftover snow slump into gray slush, and the whole place felt abandoned. I knew the shortcut through the woods would shave 15 minutes off my walk, and even though the smarter part of me said to stick to the long road, I didn't listen. The path began as it always did, boxed in by fences on both sides, one holding back a warehouse yard with tall metal panels that gleamed under the dull security lights, and the other protecting the open fields of the leisure center. The narrow lane ended under a low railway bridge, and once I passed through it, everything opened up into that stretch of wild ground everyone in the village called the wasteland. Usually the factory at the far end of it provided enough light to guide me, but that night it was either shut down or abandoned, leaving only a faint orange glow bleeding across the mud. I pulled out my earbuds when I realized just how dark it was and let the silence settle in. The ground sucked at my shoes with every step, rainwater filling the dips carved out by quad bikes, and rusted car shells sat half sunk in the mud like forgotten bones. To my left was a thin patch of trees. To my right, the deep woods rose up like a wall of darkness. That was where my pace slowed without me even deciding to. Something felt wrong. Nothing obvious, just the heavy stillness behind me, the kind that makes your shoulders tense before your mind catches up. I kept walking, telling myself I was overreacting, but every few seconds I caught myself listening too hard, waiting for a sound that wasn't coming. I thought about turning around, but another thought hit me just as fast. If someone had stepped onto the path after me, I wouldn't know until it was too late. So I kept moving, faster, head down, breath tight. The factory fence was beside me when I slipped on something solid and hit the ground. I pushed myself up, heart thumping, and that's when I heard it branches shifting inside the woods. Not little snaps like squirrels make, but heavy, deliberate steps crushing through layers of wet leaves. Three sounds: snap, crunch, snap. I turned toward the woods, and he was already stepping out. A tall man with broad shoulders, long hair hanging forward, and a stillness that made my chest tighten. He didn't speak. He didn't stumble. He didn't look confused or lost. He just stopped on the edge of the path, like he had been standing there, waiting for the exact moment I would fall. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. I tried to force my voice to sound normal, maybe ask if he needed help, but nothing came out except a shaky breath. He took one step toward me, slow and controlled, and that was enough to break whatever frozen spell I was in. I turned and ran. Not carefully, not sensibly, just pure instinct tearing me forward across the mud. The sound of him behind me was the worst part, his heavy steps hitting the ground in uneven but deliberate bursts, telling me he wasn't just walking behind me, he was coming for me. I didn't dare look back. The entire path felt endless as I sprinted toward the faint glow of the park lights ahead. My lungs burned, my legs ached, and every splash of water felt like a hand grabbing at my ankles. But I didn't stop. When the wasteland opened into the park, I pushed harder, sprinting up the hill toward the first row of houses, praying I wouldn't feel someone's hand on my back. I reached my street, yanked my keys out with trembling fingers, and stumbled inside, slamming the door behind me. Only then did I look back through the window, but the path was empty. I never saw him again, never heard footsteps behind me, never got any explanation at all. I don't know how long he followed me, or how close he came, and the part that still makes my skin crawl is how silent everything became once I ran. I don't know what he wanted. I don't know if he was waiting for someone else. I don't know if I ruined his plan by slipping on the path. All I know is that the shortcut I had taken dozens of times in daylight showed me a side of the woods I was never supposed to see, and since that night, I have never walked that way again. Especially not at Christmas, when the cold and the quiet feel far too familiar. The moment that still tightens my chest every time I think about it is the sound of a stranger's voice echoing through a house that should have been completely empty. I had been living in a quiet mountain village in New York since late 2022, a place so still that whole afternoons pass without seeing another person, and that isolation can feel peaceful until the night decides to turn on you. My parents were overseas in France for work, my sister lived far down the road, and on December 20th, the entire house was mine. I was actually excited about it, happy for one night where I could be loud on games with my friends without bothering anyone. By 3 in the morning, I finally logged off, exhausted but relaxed, and headed upstairs to shower before bed. Everything felt ordinary, familiar, safe. I turned on the water, washed up, started brushing my teeth, and was already thinking about how good it would feel to finally sleep. Then something shattered downstairs so loudly I froze mid-step. It wasn't subtle. It didn't sound like something slipping off a counter. It sounded intentional, like a glass thrown hard at the floor. I told myself to calm down and check anyway. When I reached the kitchen, a glass really was broken across the tiles, but nothing else was disturbed. No windows open, no wind, no pets. Just a destroyed glass in the middle of the room, as if someone had dropped it while standing there. I cleaned it quickly and hurried back upstairs, trying to convince myself it had been balanced wrong or something dumb like that. I had barely stepped back into the bathroom when another noise rose from the kitchen, but this time it wasn't an object. It was a man's voice, clear, normal, speaking like he belonged in my home. I shut off the bathroom light, locked the door, and pressed myself flat to the cold tiles. At first, he sounded like he was talking to someone, or maybe to himself, but then his tone turned sharp, like an argument starting. My pulse hammered when I realized this wasn't some misunderstanding or accidental intruder. Someone was in my house on purpose. My phone was in my bedroom across the hall, too close to the stairs for comfort. If he stayed in the kitchen, maybe I could make a run for it. But then I heard the footsteps on the staircase, slow and heavy, coming toward me. I felt the vibration through the floor as he reached the landing. His shoes stopped right in front of the bathroom door. I held my breath. A shadow shifted under the small gap, and then I heard the metallic click of him bending to look through the keyhole. When he spoke, his voice was calm and too close. "Is someone in there?" I didn't answer. I didn't even blink. Then his tone snapped into something unhinged as he yelled, "I know someone is in this house," followed by laughter that shook the hallway. My whole body went cold. Running past him wasn't an option, and hiding wasn't working. So I forced the strongest voice I could manage and screamed, "The police are almost here!" The silence that followed felt sharp enough to cut through the door. Then his footsteps moved, fast, down the hall and back down the stairs. I waited in the dark bathroom for what felt like half an hour but was probably only 10 minutes before I finally cracked the door open. The hallway was empty. I sprinted into my bedroom, grabbed my phone with shaking hands, and dialed emergency services. The police arrived quickly and searched the house and the area around it. They didn't find him, but they found something else in the garden, a small bag with random items inside, a flashlight, cigarettes, glue, a Swiss knife. Nothing valuable, yet nothing comforting either. I called my parents, and they rushed back the next morning. We still don't know how he got in, because every door and window showed no sign of damage, which somehow makes it worse. What I think about most, the detail that won't leave my mind, is the quiet moment before he spoke through that keyhole. The idea that his eye was inches from mine, and that he whispered into the dark just to see if someone would answer. Something about that winter still sticks with me in a way I can't shake. The weeks when the sky felt permanently dim and the air never warmed. And the night two strangers came to our door in Iowa keeps drifting back into my mind like it happened yesterday. I remember walking downstairs to grab something from the kitchen while my mom and sister were in the living room, laughing at some show, when the doorbell rang. It felt routine at first. People sometimes came by selling roof repairs or offering church flyers, so I opened the door without thinking twice. But the second I saw the two men standing there, something in my body tightened before my mind even registered why. They were both dressed in heavy black coats that looked decades old, the fabric worn in that strange way that didn't look vintage so much as forgotten. The man in front was slim, with almost white hair, and a face that looked carved down, like life had pressed every soft part out of him. His eyes were so pale they didn't even look blue, more like washed-out gray, and when he stared at me, it didn't feel like he was seeing me at all, just observing something behind me that I couldn't sense. He started talking right away, not introducing himself, not mentioning a church, not handing over a pamphlet, just launching into this unsettling ramble about the earth changing hands and the week rising up, and some strange version of scripture I didn't recognize. He didn't breathe between lines. He didn't blink. He didn't stop long enough for me to say a word. It wasn't a conversation. It was like he was trying to push something into my head and watching how much I could take before breaking. And the longer he spoke, the more a cold heaviness crept through my chest until even my fingers felt distant. I must have looked normal on the outside because my mom later said I seemed calm, but Inside, it felt like someone had cut the connection between what I wanted my body to do and what it actually did. Every instinct screamed at me to close the door, to step back, to lock it, but my legs stayed still like they weren't mine. The second man didn't help. He stood slightly behind the first, heavier, nearly bald, holding a small black Bible that looked so worn the cover was almost peeling away. But he never followed along or read it. He just slowly flipped the pages over and over as if he was killing time, waiting for the moment the other man decided he was done. And that was somehow worse, because it made me realize this wasn't some confused pair of door-to-door preachers. They had a purpose to being there, I just didn't know what. The blonde man kept going until something in his expression shifted, like he had learned whatever he came to learn. Then he stopped mid-sentence. No goodbye, no blessing, nothing. It was just silence. Somehow my voice came back long enough to say something like, "Okay, thank you," even though I don't remember forming the words. When I closed the door, it felt like someone had cut a string inside me. My knees nearly gave out. I stood there with my hand on the knob while my mom hurried over, asking if I was okay. She said she had seen his face from the couch and felt something so wrong she almost called me away from the door, but stopped herself because she didn't want them to know my name. My mom is not the paranoid type. Hearing her say that made my stomach twist even harder. We looked out the window a minute later, but the men were already gone, walking down the street without looking back, as if the visit had been nothing more than a box they needed to check. I've talked to plenty of people handing out religious material before and after that night, and not a single one felt anything like those two. Whatever they were doing, it wasn't preaching. It felt like they were studying us, testing us, or waiting for something we couldn't see. And the worst part is that I still feel that same quiet alarm rise in me whenever the doorbell rings on a winter night. There are moments in life when your instincts whisper before your brain understands anything, and that night was one of those moments. Because even though nothing looked dangerous at first, something in me kept pulling tight like a warning I couldn't quite translate. I had taken my uncle's offer to move to Colorado because everything in Southern California had basically fallen apart for me. I was 21, broke, tired, and surrounded by people living in a world I couldn't afford to touch. My roommates were heading to New York, my mom had moved to Las Vegas, and I felt like my life was this empty apartment I kept wandering around in, with no real reason to stay. The only thing left to deal with was my wreck of a car, this fading machine I had pushed far past its lifespan until the engine practically coughed out its last breath. I listed it online for cheap just to make it disappear before my move, and a man messaged almost immediately saying he bought dead cars for parts. We set a meeting for that evening, and by the time he pulled into the lot in a dark SUV, winter had already swallowed the sunlight and the air felt sharp enough to cut. He got out and spoke with a thick accent, friendly enough, but his eyes kept watching me in a way I couldn't place. I showed him the car, started it. It shook violently, sputtered, and died, and he barely reacted before lowballing me with an offer of $150. I didn't have time or energy to argue, so I agreed. While he shuffled papers, he kept telling me I should sit inside his SUV to warm up. He repeated it over and over, too persistent, too rehearsed. I perched on the edge of the seat for a moment just to avoid conflict, but the way he watched me made every muscle stay ready to bolt. The second he slid into the driver's seat, I stepped out, pretending like I had just remembered something. That was when he told me he forgot the cash and needed to drive to an ATM, then calmly insisted I go with him. My whole chest tightened. I told him I had dinner on the stove. He tried again. I repeated it more firmly. Something shifted in his face, just a flicker, before he finally backed down and drove off. When I got upstairs, I realized my hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the uneasy truth that something almost happened, and I didn't yet understand what. I stood on my balcony so I'd see him return the second he pulled into the lot. 15 minutes later, he came back. I went down to meet him, and he handed me the money. It was $150, exactly the amount, but not ATM cash. Fresh bills, crisp, clean, like he'd had them the whole time. And that tiny detail hit harder than anything else, because it confirmed that whatever reason he'd wanted me in that SUV, it wasn't about buying a car. I still don't know what he had planned or why he kept trying to get me inside with him, but every Christmas since then, when the world gets cold and dark early, I remember how close I came to stepping fully into that vehicle, and how one small instinct, one uneasy breath, might have been the only thing that kept me from vanishing that night.